Chair, we're good to go.
Good morning, everybody, and I welcome all councillors and members of the public to the latest meeting of Northamptonshire Executive, including all those watching the meeting via the live stream on our YouTube channel. Members are reminded to keep your microphones muted unless you are invited to speak. Thank you. So, agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Smithers, Leader of the Council, Graham Kane and Guy Holloway. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further apologies? No. Thank you very much. So, agenda item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of November 2023. The minutes of the meeting held on that date are set out on pages 5 to 36 of the agenda pack. Are there any comments in respect to their accuracy? No, thank you. Please may I have a mover and a seconder to approve those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. Thank you, Councillor Howes. So approval of the minutes has been moved and seconded. Please may I see a vote in favour?
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, members' declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members? No, no declarations. Thank you very much. So agenda item 4 is notifications of requests to address the meeting, and I can confirm that we've received requests to address the meeting in relation to the following items. Item 5 is Councillor Pengelly, Councillor Lee and Councillor Lynn Buckingham. Item 6 is Councillor Matt Keane, Councillor Dorothy Maxwell. Item 7 is Councillor Hakewill, Councillor Keane, Mr Michael Blissett and Councillor Maxwell. Item 8 is Councillor Lynn Buckingham, Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Hakewill. Item 9 is Councillor Lee and Councillor Maxwell. Item 10 is Councillor Lynn Buckingham and Councillor Hakewill. Item 11 is Councillor Lynn Buckingham. Item number 12 is Councillor Jim Hakewill. Item 13 is Councillor Anne Lee and Councillor Jim Hakewill. And item 14 is Councillor Lynn Buckingham and Councillor Hakewill. Thank you. So agenda item 5, Performance Indicator Report 2023/24, period 7 October 2023. So I'd like to invite Councillor Mark Pengelly. I don't see him actually. He's not attended. Okay, we'll leave that one. Thank you. And now I'd like to invite Councillor Anne Lee to address the meeting. Councillor Lee, you have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Right, just a few notes about a few key performance indicators. On page 47, the rate of breastfeeding is up. That gives babies a good start, but the accompanying explanation about breastfeeding increasing because of poverty is a sobering thought. Below that, we see that we see that of children who received a 6 to 8 week view by the time they were 8 weeks is only 90%. So 10% of mothers do not receive their 6 to 8 week review in time. Now, I wonder if are there any services that the mother can call on to help if she's got problems with breastfeeding, because it would be around that time that the problems occur. Then the last entry on page 47 is about the percentage of substance misuse clients waiting for more than 3 weeks for their first intervention. There are no data there. It's 0, whereas there is a serious problem with drug abuse in this county. I look forward to the plan in January, because it's on the forward agenda about substance misuse and treatment services. Page 49, I draw your attention there on the figure of 21.5% of initial child protection conferences held within 15 days of a strategy discussion being initiated. 21.5%. That has dropped dramatically since the report was written that we will get under item 9. So I will remind you of that figure then. Please bear in mind 21.5% in the last recording period. Thanks. That's Page 50, the number of home-educated children is increasing again. My question, is there anyone in North Northants Council monitoring the quality of their education or the well-being of home-educated children? That's what I wanted to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I'm sure the executive member will address some of your questions when we get to their presentation and the debate following that. I'd now like to invite Councillor Lynn Buckingham to address the meeting. Councillor Buckingham, you also have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to pass on this one, please.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I would now like to invite Councillor Lloyd Bundy, Executive Member for Finance and Transformation, to introduce the report. Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure that my colleagues around the table will address some of your issues. The one with regard to the children's figure, 21%, they are different in time and timings between the annual report and the monthly report. And I would say that although it would appear that it's dropped significantly, the difference might just be 1 day, 2 days. It's not major, but I'm sure my colleagues will discuss that. Moving on to this report, it's the October Period 7 report, and it contains just under half of the total key performance indicators. There's 66 indicators reported, 52 are reported in month, 2 are reported a month in arrears, and there's also 12 of the quarterly KPIs, which are, again, reported a month in arrears, which is why they're in this report as well. Of the 39 KPIs with established targets, 23 are exceeding the target, 9 are operating within an acceptable tolerance, and 7 are performing below target. 56 KPIs have a determined polarity of the direction of travel. Among these, performance has shown improvement in 21 indicators, while 13 indicators have experienced a decline. Some of our indicators are tracked, which means that they don't have a target, and 17 have a determined polarity for direction of travel. Of these, 7 are showing improvement, 4 have remained the same or deteriorated very, very marginally, and 5 have deteriorated by more than 5%. Looking at our corporate priorities, the Better Brighter Futures commitment has performed well, with over 70% of its target KPIs exceeding the respective targets. Only one KPI is currently underperforming. In the Safe and Thriving Places commitment, it's also performing well, and more than 63% of the KPIs exceeding their targets. I'm sure other colleagues around the table want to comment on KPIs pertaining to their own areas, Chair, but with that I'm happy to propose the recommendations of paragraph 3.
Thank you, Councillor Bundy. I'd now like to invite member debate from the floor. Thank you. Councillor Harrison, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Lee for all her questions, many of which relate to my area. So if we start with the breastfeeding rates, it's absolutely super to see that those rates are improving and close to the target level. It is better for both mother and baby when they are able to breastfeed to do so. I think your point about poverty is that this is a really, really helpful step forward for any new mother trying to cope with the cost of living, because not only is it going to save that family money, it is actually, if they're able to do it, it is better for both the mother and the baby. So I think this is a really positive step forward. I want to see that continue to improve, and I'm just delighted that it is. So that's my comments on breastfeeding. In terms of infants due a new birth visit, and the other one, children who've received the 6 to 8 week review, both of those are on target, which is superb. And all of these targets and the quality of these visits will be looked at in our recommissioning of our 0 to 19s services. Just to reassure you that if somebody misses these targets, it's usually because that family is a hard-to-reach family, and it doesn't stop there. It doesn't mean that the health visitors don't continue to go out and try to make contact with those families. Some people have very chaotic lives, so these families will continue to be pursued is perhaps not quite the right word, but taken care of until they do get those checks. So this is just the very narrow parameters of that particular time period. And again, I'm really delighted that these are on target and that those children and the parents are getting those visits. You didn't mention the health checks, but I know it's something you've been very, very interested over the last couple of years. And I'm delighted that those are also going in the right direction and beginning to perform in the way we would like them to. So that's just to flag that up. That's really, really encouraging to see. And then finally, on the substance misuse, the measure here is I think this is a new measure for us, and it's about really rapid response substance misuse assistance. And that's something that, again, through our recommissioning of services, we're going to be tackling. And I'm sure you're aware that we have the new Combating Drugs Partnership, where a lot of the really good work is going on. And we're going to see big strides forward in the way we and our partners work together to deliver really top-notch substance misuse services. So watch that space. What you will see in the comment is that we're meeting the demands for people requiring those services, but this particular measure is very, very rapid response. So we'll be reporting back on that over the next few months, and hopefully you start to see that being better populated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. I have Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. And just to follow up on Councillor Harrison's about the breastfeeding. So the Family Hub, actually, so the one that's been launched in Wellingborough, has a breastfeeding programme. And they have an app where new mothers can log on and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where they can get information about doing that. They have also worked with Kettering General Hospital to be able to give breast pumps straight away, rather than waiting 2 or 3 weeks for a breast pump. They get it there and then as they leave the hospital. So this has an increase. Now, I'm quite happy to send you the app details. In fact, I'll send them to all councillors so they can send that information out. The home education, I am going to have to come back to you on. Bear with me, actually. Okay, so we have very limited power to intervene and cannot insist on being involved with home education. I didn't know that, sorry, so we'd literally just asked the question. So, yeah, there is very little we can do if parents opt to home educate at home. Obviously, if they are on a at-risk register, then they are still monitored throughout that, and any indications through the public part related to MASH as well is still monitored as well through the children. And the child protection conferences, so within the 15 days, it has dropped, but as Councillor Bunday alluded to, so they are two very different reports and two very different time frames as well. But because it is a multi-agency assessment, sometimes we're having to rely on some of the other agencies to get there in time. But if sometimes, in fact, most of the time, it is only 1 or 2 days over the 15 days. But you're right, it's not acceptable. It is 15 days for a reason, so it should be 15. So there is a plan in place to get all those agencies working together to make sure that it is done within the 15 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I have Councillor Brackenbury.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just moving over to planning. Slightly disappointing KPIs this month, but there is a reason and a context behind it all. The figures are actually well within the tolerance that we're expected to be delivering, and there is a good deal of work going on in the planning service in terms of recruiting new officers, which will of course directly assist in this. And there is also a piece of work going on for resolving some thorny old backlogs which sometimes exist from some of our previous authorities, and as well as Northamptonshire. So of course that is diverting some resource. And as I say, Chair, every month really, these are very valuable, these KPIs. They give a snapshot. There is often a context that underpins that snapshot, but they do give a context. They do give an idea of what's going on in a service. And so they're very valuable KPIs to keep an eye on to determine what's going on in the various directorates. So much to be welcomed. And we are keeping a very close eye on what's going on in the planning service, and will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. I have no more speakers, so Councillor Bunday, you have moved the report. I'd like to call for a seconder, please. Councillor Edwards, thank you. So the recommendations are set out on page 38 of the agenda pack. They have been moved and seconded. Please may I see a show of hands in favour?
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 6, amendment to adult social care charging policy. I'd like to invite Councillor Matt Keane to address the meeting. Councillor Keane, you have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. In September 21, the government set out plans to reform adult social care in England. It said £5.4 billion would be used to fund the reforms between 23 and 25. The funding was initially planned to come in from the new Health and Social Care Levy, but in September 22, the government announced that would be cancelled. Then the government proposed adult social care charging reforms would be implemented from October 23. However, at the 2022 autumn statement, the Chancellor announced that the reforms would be delayed for another 2 years, with the funding allocated to allow local authorities to provide more care packages. I'd like to know what other care packages that we're looking at as a council. I'm worried that national government is kicking this costly reform down the line to local authorities, and we'll be continuing to pick up the price for inadequate national reform, which will be passed on to the most in need. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. I'd now like to invite Councillor Maxwell to address the meeting. Councillor Maxwell, you also have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning. Amendments to adult social care charging. I feel the council has no option but to make sure that the council is in line with other councils in regarding to this policy. The question is, how do we know these people are receiving the correct care and also being treated correctly? All too often, we are paying for treatment, which is often they're not getting. It means these nursing homes do not treat people and get away with it. Monday's panorama. Who monitors nursing homes in this country? And are they getting value for money and not being treated unfairly because they're not paying for this? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Harrison, Executive Member for Adults, Health and Wellbeing, to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you to Councillor Keane and Councillor Maxwell for your questions. Social care reform obviously is a really important part of looking at social care provision for the future. And some of those delays have been unfortunate, but also some of those delays, some of those changes would have had a massive cost impact on the council. So I believe that there's been a certain amount of thought going on in the background there. We as a council continue to strive for the best possible care for our residents, and my social care teams work incredibly hard and diligently to provide that. Councillor Maxwell, how do we make sure that people are getting the right care? Through care assessments, through annual reviews, and through quality monitoring. So the purpose of this report, it's a fairly dry report, but there's some detail in this that's probably worth making sure is understood. So the purpose of the report is to seek agreement to amend the social care fees and charges policy to remove reference to exemption from charging for community-based care services for people who are in receipt of a Department of Work and Pensions DS 1500 fast-track benefit claim form. The purpose of a DS 1500 certificate is to fast-track a person for a benefit application, as the expectation is that they have less than 6 months to live, not to exempt them from financial assessment for care charges. The charging policy adopted by the Council was a historic Northamptonshire County Council policy. The rationale to exempt people from community-based charges is not known. North Northamptonshire Council and West Northamptonshire Council are the only local authorities who appear to operate this policy. It's not based on any legislation or statutory charging regulations. In April 2023, the DS 1500 certificate became defunct and was replaced by the DWP with the SR1 form. The scope of the SR1 form is different from DS 1500 in that life expectancy for fast-track benefit applications is for people with a terminal diagnosis of 12 months. This paper proposes that we remove reference to the DS 1500 exemption to charging from the charging policy and not extend the exemption to the SR1 form. The Council currently has 50 people exempt from charges due to having a DS 1500 certificate. The average contribution for a person receiving community care services is £59.08 a week, and on this basis the Council are losing at least £153,000 in income annually due to this exemption that we're currently enacting. Based on current numbers and the extended scope of the SR1 form, it's not unrealistic to expect that that number, the 153k, could double if we decided to extend the exemption to the SR1 form. And just to assure anybody who is concerned about those people who currently have a DS 1500 certificate, it's proposed that absolutely no change is going to be made to these people's charging arrangements. So if they're currently exempt from care fees because they have a DS 1500, they will continue to be exempt. We are not going to retrospectively enact this change. Finally, I think in making this amendment to the charging policy, we're ensuring that it reflects the latest practice of DWP, because that DS 1500 form no longer exists, and that we are minimising inequalities in financial contributions towards care and support, because at the moment, clearly, we're treating one cohort of people differently to another in exempting them from charges. And finally, last point, it's worth noting that people who need end-of-life care will be on the Continuing Healthcare Fast Track, CHC for short, and it will be the responsibility of the NHS to meet their needs, and so those people are out of scope for adult social care charges in any event. So I hope that's explained it fairly clearly, and with that I'm happy to recommend the proposals at 3.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. I think that was very clear. Yes, thank you very much. So I'd now like to invite members to debate from the floor. Is there anybody who'd like to speak on this paper? Okay, I think you did a very good job there, Councillor Harrison, and it's clear to everybody exactly what this report is about. So thank you. You moved the report. I'd now like to call for a seconder, please. Councillor Binley, thank you. So the recommendations are set out on page 56 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Please may I have a show of hands in favour?
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. We're moving on now to agenda item 7, Travellers Temporary Stopping Site Land at Junction 3 of the A14 in Rothwell. So I'd like to invite Councillor Jim Hakewill to address the meeting, and Councillor Hakewill, you will have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. This item should be considered within the emerging Gypsy and Traveller local plan process, which was adopted as recently as your last executive on the 16th of November 2023. That decision is now published for all to see on the Council's website. 3.5 website, public consultation on the scope and options associated sustainability appraisal scoping report, that's a handy title, took place between the 5th of April and the 31st of May 23, has yet to be considered. The projected timescale for the North Northamptonshire Gypsy and Traveller Local Plan proposes consultation on a draft plan in March and April 24. The communities of North Northamptonshire, including Rothwell, should be able to take your recent decision on face value and be confident of the process and know when major policy decisions like provision for our Gypsy and Traveller community will be scrutinised. If this was a random speculative application from a private developer, it could be understood as that. But this is our own council with our own portfolio holder fully promoting it. If we can't do the boring things like properly engaging with legislation, what chance do we have of encouraging the wider community to embrace our processes? There is nothing different from this agenda item than was roundly criticised a year ago. Indeed, the exact same plans are before us today. Hundreds of people were astonished by the idea that a lovely green space full of wildlife should be destroyed, proposed to be dug up, concreted, and effectively destroyed in total. I have heard that various people like the MP and portfolio holder have sought to comfort people concerned about this proposal by saying it'll never be used. I look forward to presenting that to our auditors and seeking a best value review of spending 1.3 million and 100k annually on a facility that's unlikely to be used. It's quite disingenuous to suggest that nothing has been decided or will be by the approval of this item today. The recommendations provide for an application to be progressed following pre-application already received. Scarce resources will be committed to this decision. Take this off the agenda, place the papers within the March-April 2024 consultation and properly look at traveller provision across the whole of Northamptonshire. I sincerely hope you will take it off the agenda, but I also can say there will be massive unrest if you continue along this path. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hakewill. Excuse me. I would now like to invite Councillor McKean to address the meeting, and Councillor Keane, you also have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. While I see a need for a facility like this in North Northamptonshire, I'd like to know firstly if we'll be able to know what other locations were looked at, including those with a bigger capacity. I say that because when I've been called out to many unauthorised encampments as a councillor, and as my time as a councillor there, it's been really rare that there's been less than 10, which is the pitches that are going to be allocated. So say we have 15, where are we going to send the other 5 to? And what would we do if it was already full? And lastly, could you tell us what why the government-funded scheme was turned down, meaning that if we're going to go ahead with this, it's going to be funded by NNC? I understand it was backed by the council, police, MPs, and the Gypsy and Travellers Forum. So do we have any other feedback rather than it was a oversubscribed national policy why we failed in that bid? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. I'd now like to invite Mr. Michael Blissett to address the meeting, and Mr. Blissett, you also have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Is that on or off? Right, sorry. This capital grant application is so flawed and poorly thought out that it should not be approved today, but any decision delayed until a proper feasibility investigation is carried out, and it should also be considered alongside the developing Gypsy Traveller Local Plan policy rather than one potential location being put forward outside the agreed planning policy. The site is not the right site, too expensive to construct, and of wildlife interest, the A14 and local roads being gridlocked at many times of the day. There are more suitable sites in the area, like the one at Desborough that already has planning permission, and the one in Corby that is already hard surfaced and would be quite easy to convert at a quarter of the cost with minimal running costs. Northamptonshire Wildlife Trusts have carried out their survey and say that the site is of significant wildlife interest and must be protected from development. Rothwell Town Council are totally opposed to this development, and it has always been expected to be a wildlife area park for the people of Rothwell and is included in their new proposed parish plan. Councillor Howes, in your proposal, you say the cost was 950k and it would now be 1.3. This is not the case. As a building contractor, which I am, I can say that costs have escalated over the last year, and by the time this site is constructed in 24-25, it'll be 2 million. On top of this, there is a yearly running cost of 115k that is ongoing year on year and will have to be funded by the council taxpayers. Councillor Howes, in your own admission, you say the sites are becoming less needed and would be likely to stand empty for long periods of the time, meaning there is no income from the site to run the site and pay the interest on the 2 million plus the borrowed money. So who is going to fund the ongoing yearly running costs? The taxpayers again. Councillor Howes, and generally on page 68, you point out that you don't know where the funding is coming from to actually run the site. You are having to employ operatives 24 hours a day, 365 days per year, plus all the maintenance and cleaning costs. You are having to employ these people whether there are people on site or not. It is totally unacceptable to put this liability again onto the local taxpayers. If it is approved today, then it will lead to horrendous financial burdens on the local taxpayers with no end to it, and it goes on year on year. You say your local MP supports this application, but they don't. This is the exact wording sent to me by Philip Oliver last week. I'm afraid it is not for me to support or not. It is entirely a matter for the North Northamptonshire Council. I'm not a member of the NNC. I have no part in making the decision. If the NNC wants to make a bid to the HN government for funding, I would support that because it would relieve financial burden on the local taxpayers. The council is so strapped for cash at the moment. There are so many other things that money needs to be spent on in the Kettering area. That is why we should not be spending what could be £2 million
Your time is up, sir. Thank you very much for attending.
An ongoing cost of £115,000.
Thank you very much for attending.
Can I just ask, Chairman? I did email copies out.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Blissett. Thank you very much.
One councillor has said
Councillors have all seen your letter. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. I would now like to invite Councillor Dorothy Maxwell to address the meeting. And Councillor Maxwell, you also have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning again. Travellers Temporary Stop-in Site Junction 3. Looking at this report is a great step forward in stopping travellers rocking up anywhere, leaving a mess, just not bothered about the community. The cost of the site is unbelievable, and cleaning and using this type of money. But on the face of it, it will help in 2 years' time, particularly in Woodford, where they cut down 132 trees and no worry about what happens then. Now they're supposed to put them back by the Forestry Commission. Just how? What happens if you need to enforce certain aspects regarding the behaviour of the people? Are the police involved? It says it is, but are they? We own this land, therefore no problems, not an issue. How many does it take? And lastly, the running costs and maintenance, who's actually going to foot that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. So I would now like to invite Councillor David Howes, Executive Member for Rural Communities and Localism, to introduce the report.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. So if I address some of the points made in the letter and in some of the speakers' comments first, in no particular order. So in regards to the letter, it suggests that there is a site at Desborough already has planning permission. I think this is referring to a site that has planning permission for 10 permanent traveller 10 permanent traveller pitches. The key point about this is, first of all, we don't own the site, so it's not in the owner's wishes that this site is used as a stopping site. The other issue, if it's the one I believe it is that could cause quite a contentious problem if a stopping site was located there. But the key point is we don't own the site. So when you don't own something, it's very unlikely you can decide what happens to it. Regarding the point about the Wildlife Trust have carried out a survey, that there's going to be a planning process that this goes through. The interesting thing about this particular site that we now own on the A14 is that it was originally bought by the Borough Council of Kettering, and the intention for this site was for commercial development. So it's obviously not being proposed as commercial development, but this site was never intended to be a site for a development for wildlife or ecological reasons. So in regards to the points of the cost, the costs are what the report states. I can only go on the professional advice of officers to suggest that the development of this site is going to cost in the region of 1.3 million. I would hope that it will cost less, but that's obviously what the professional advice is. In regards to the running costs, I think there's a slight misunderstanding because the letter suggests that there's going to be a running cost of £115,000. It's not going to be a cost of that. The report clearly states that it's going to be about £50,000 a year. I think this is misunderstood because the NTU is going to go through an upgrade in service level, which is irrespective of the stopping site, and that investment is going to cost £65,000. And part of what they're going to be delivering is the management of this site. So the actual reality of the cost, and again, Madam Chair, I'd like to believe that it's going to be a lot less than £50,000 a year for all the things that are involved in managing and running the stopping site. But obviously, again, I only have the advice in the report that suggests that it's going to be £50,000 a year. In terms of the point about I don't know or we don't know where the funding is coming from to actually run the site, I think I've just alluded to a big part of that is going to be within the NTU budget proposal of an increase in £65,000, which gives us an additional resource. It will be coming out of the usual council budget to run the site. So I'm not sure why there's a perception we don't know where the money's coming from. So that covers that. In regards to some of the questions, why was the funding turned down? I think Councillor Keane made this point. That it literally was a case of it was oversubscribed. There was a £10 million pot of money. It was heavily applied for by local authorities across the UK. We hope, but it is only a hope, that there might be future pots of funding come available. And of course, if that happens, we will of course bid for that funding if and when we're ready to be able to do that. But the ultimate answer is there was no particular feedback to suggest that the bid was an issue. It was simply a case of there was far too many applications and other applications were deemed more satisfactory. The question in regards to what happens if we get more than 10 vehicles arrive in our location at any one point, it's a good question. I'm afraid it's a case of, we could provide 20 pitches and there could be 21 arrive at any particular point. So it's a question I can't answer right now, but most of the time the number is usually less than 10. But there are occasions when it has been more. I think Councillor Maxwell is absolutely right in terms of the knock-on effects when we see traveller encampments arrive in our area, and some of the time, some of the mess that or disruption that they can cause. This gives them an opportunity to be directed to something much more relevant to their needs. In regards to the enforcement, again, I've alluded to the fact we're going to be running and managing the site. The police are going to be heavily involved in pushing people towards the site if and when the encampments come into our area out of hours. So it's going to effectively be a joint job between the police and NTU to manage the site. So going on to my report, Madam Chair. So why are we doing this? So we have a strategic need set out in the GTAA from 2019, which is the Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment, which we operate under. And in that, it clearly states that we should be providing a stopping site, and we don't have one. So it's always been the aspiration of this executive that we seek to find and deliver a stopping site. That's always been the case, and we have been working to that aim. So what is the stopping site? So the stopping site is designed for the traveller community or travelling through the area for whatever reason. So this, just to be clear, this does not address unauthorised permanent developments. This is a separate matter which we also need to supply permanent facilities and sites for, which is the main part of the local plan. So in regards to the question of why this stopping site is not being considered in line with the main local plan, it's primarily because the local plan is about supplying the 5-year land supply. The provision would reduce the impacts felt from unauthorised encampments on local communities camped at the roadside and other public-private land. This will be achieved by the police having additional powers to move the traveller group either to the stopping site or leave the council area. So this is the key aspect of what this stopping site enables us to do, or enables the police to do. At the moment, the police do not have powers of Section 62, which with a stopping site in the local authority area, they would absolutely have that power. We have discussed this at great length with the police, and they are fully in support that we should have a stopping site, and they will use unequivocally powers of Section 62 to move that traveller encampment almost immediately, because they usually arrive on site fairly quickly, and they will literally move and direct the travellers to that local stopping site. If they do not wish to go to the stopping site, which they obviously do not have to, then they will be escorted, and we have this from the police, they will be escorted to the boundary of the edge of our area. The site is to be put on junction 3 of the A14. Primarily, there's a number, obviously, of reasons for that, for excellent road connectivity to the entire area. It's almost slap bang in the middle of our geographical area, and it gives the police the ability to move the travellers to that area nice and conveniently. I think we alluded to this earlier. We applied to the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, DLUC, for just under £1 million in June 22. As the scheme was oversubscribed, we were unsuccessful at the time, but as I said earlier, we are quite happy to apply if future funding becomes available. So the purpose of the site is to provide a safe and secure area of suitable welfare facilities for travellers passing through the area. They will be able to stop for a maximum of 28 days at a time, and would also allow other directed support to be provided if required. So we already do that, but of course it's going to be much more convenient and sustainable for us to be able to direct other provisions that they may require to that facility. Finally, the report sets out the benefits of providing a stopping site, and it is seeking the approval of the Executive Committee to fund the £1.3 million estimated capital cost of the project, and to add the project to the 24-25 capital programme to enable this to proceed and be delivered. My view is that this is now going to massively assist the council and the police to resolve an issue that this area has had for decades. This is obviously the start of the process, Madam Chair, but this is going to resolve a significant problem we've had for decades, and for decades more, in the respect that we have much more control and authority along with the police to put the travellers in a provision that's suitable for them, and most importantly as well, our settled community. I'd like to propose the recommendation set out in points A and B of 3.1 in the report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Howes. So I would now like to invite member debate from the floor. Are there any? Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to welcome the movement forward towards a stopping site. I think from a public health point of view, this is something that we absolutely need. Having travellers stopping where there are no facilities for them to use is not a good public health situation, and so I think it's really important for us to, as a council, to move ahead with getting a stopping site. It'd be better for the health of the travellers and better for the health of local residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Brackenbury.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Howes, for your report. Yes, I mean, we do. As you say, it's been many years that we've been seeking to get a stopping site in. It will prevent unauthorised encampments because they can be travellers can be rapidly moved on to a facility which provides them with decent facilities for themselves, and it will enable a much clearer focus and control to be kept on the movement of travellers. There will be 10 pitches, as I understand it, and if the pitches are all occupied, or if a group of travellers do not wish to take up vacant pitches, then they would be escorted to the boundaries of North Northamptonshire. I think there is a genuine need throughout North Northamptonshire for this site, and of course with regard to the specifics of the site that is proposed, as you rightly point out, it will go through the full planning process and will obviously be determined in due course. So I welcome the report and I welcome the concept behind it.
Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. Councillor Bunday.
Thank you, Chair. Since, all the time I've ever been a councillor, the police have been telling me that a stopping site would make their lives a lot easier and make the control of illegal encampments far better. As Councillor Howe said, the land was originally purchased by Kettering Borough Council as commercial development land, but I also seem to remember, and this is something I think for the councillors of Rothwell to take back, I seem to remember that the councillors of Rothwell were proposing that would be a fire station. And fire stations, to me, are concrete, so they're not wildlife land. So that's what Rothwell councillors wanted in the first place. So I'm surprised that now the against, and I have to question what the motives are.
Thank you, Councillor Bunday. Councillor Rowley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Fully take on board everything that Councillor Howes has said. For as long as I've been a borough councillor on the Rural Forum, there's been demands on that forum for a stopping site, so it's not something new. The amount of disruption that's caused on the illegal sites, every community has always demanded that the travellers are moved on without a stopping site. All we're doing is moving them to another area in the county for them to cause disruption for that community. So having a stopping site will at least give us the opportunity to stop the illegal encampments and move people on if they don't want to use it. Also, we've got to bear in mind we're not actually approving this today. All we're doing is recommending it goes to full council, where it will have full discussion there, and it will go through the planning process, which will have its due diligence for all the relevant authorities to have their say. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Councillor Binley.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor House, for that very detailed report. I understand, and my source may be incorrect, but somebody who lives in Rothwell, that there previously have been issues with illegal encampments in Rothwell from the traveller community until a housing estate was built on the piece of land in question. So I understand, of course, as a lot of members have said, that this is an issue that we have across the entire local authority, and this would be another tool that our officers and the police will have in their arsenal to be able to help support moving on illegal encampments, but as Councillor Harrison said, to also provide facilities for those. And I think it's interesting that, of course, that as a result, the success of this would be that it's not used because, of course, it means that we will not have people coming here to camp illegally. We do have the the permanent sites, as Councillor Howes has mentioned. And I do think that, you know, Councillor Howes, you have got a difficult task in front of you with this one. To steal somebody else's saying, it's grasping the nettle. And of course, one of the things that you find with this kind of situation is that, and you know, we see it with what's going on social media already when these things are being discussed, is that individuals will very publicly say that we must be doing something for certain members of society, and you know, the traveller community absolutely being one of them, that we should be doing more as a local authority to support them with providing them with facilities. However, unfortunately, then what happens is when something's put forward, it's, no, we don't want it here. No, put it somewhere else. And there is an element of hypocrisy there amongst individuals. And Councillor Howes, you know, you have got a challenge there with those individuals and that engagement. Of course, I know that it's going to go through the planning process. So, of course, that will be able to be discussed as part of the consultation process. But unfortunately, that's what we face. And I don't think there is ever going to be a site that, of course, is going to please everybody. It's not going to happen. It's about finding the site that works best, as best as it possibly can. I suppose that not the lesser of two evils, but, you know, the best possible situation that we can find out of it. So it is a difficult one. And I do support this, Madam Chair, because, you know, I do think that we have got to go ahead with this. And provide that additional support. Having been on, you know, in law enforcement and having dealt with illegal encampments, I know how challenging it is for, you know, things like the NTU and the police. So we do need that additional tool in the arsenal. So I do support this.
Thank you, Councillor Binley. Excuse me. Yeah, and this is the start of a process. So, you know, as it's been clearly stated, there's a full process to go through. There's planning, there's consultation and everything. So I think everybody will have the opportunity to get more involved and engage further with it. This is, as Councillor Howes has said, the start of that process. So, Councillor Howes, I'll take it that you've moved the paper, the recommendations.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, the one thing I omitted that we haven't mentioned, which I'll just finally mention and sum up, is that there is obviously a cost that's attributed for the stopping site if the travelling community wish to stay. There is a bond which they pay for damage if they cause damage, and of course there is a weekly cost, which is significant, Madam Chair. So although this is not necessarily going to recoup the full capital cost or the ongoing cost, there is a charge that they will have to pay. Councillor Bentley's point, absolutely right. It's a very difficult issue, but we have to supply a stopping site. And finally, the final thing is that this site was selected by officers. They produced a short list of sites that we owned, and this was the officer recommendation for the most suitable location for a stopping site. But I think, Madam Chair, that is everything. So just finally to sum up, I'd like to propose the recommendations set out in A and B in point 3.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howes. So Councillor Howes has moved the recommendations. Councillor Binley, I see you happy to second the paper, the report. Thank you. And the recommendations are set out on page 62 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Please may I see a show of hands in favour. Thank you.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for your contributions. So we move on to agenda item 8, approval of Department for Transport additional highway maintenance funding for 23-24 and 24-25. I'd like to invite Councillor Lynn Buckingham to address the meeting. Councillor Buckingham, the usual 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And obviously we welcome this report. After underfunding of highways for some number of years, it's nice to get some money back in, albeit on the back of HS2. But it's about maintenance in the right place at the right time. And I wouldn't like to see it go into just a general pot, but have plans for that. We've got things that are waiting to be funded, like the crossing between Weldon and Priors Hall, Eden Park, Access Road is almost like a third world bomb site with so many potholes you wouldn't believe. But again, we notice the Department for Transport obligations for all this money, but want it spent where it will make the best impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckingham. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Dorothy Maxwell to address the meeting. Councillor Maxwell, you have 3 minutes. Councillor Maxwell, could you please make sure that you're speaking into the microphone? We're having trouble in hearing you on our live stream. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Is that okay? Great.
I think so.
Right. Good morning again. This funding for 1.9 million has to be accepted. It does not say which roads will accept the fund. Maintenance of roads is at the present unacceptable, but part of the 8.3 billion is clearly going to help us. When will it start? Who decides which roads will benefit from this money? The road that I've just come down, the Corby Road, will take $1 million to fix. It's long overdue. It will be interesting into what the next step will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Hakewell to address the meeting. Councillor Hakewell, the usual 3 minutes for you too. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I should probably declare, although it's on my declaration, I'm a member of the Economy and Resources Board at the LGA and also a substitute member of the Improvement and Innovation Board, both of which lobby on funding for local government. The resources from government are naturally welcome. Indeed, the leader was recently asking government for a longer settlement than annually, and by inference, more resources to bridge funding gaps locally. What I don't quite get is how the cancellation of HS2 project north of Birmingham, based on not having the money, is now providing the money that by implication we don't have to carry out other projects around the country. It's certainly interesting economics. I'll leave you to contemplate that. I note that in item 4.3, page 86, if members want to look at it, of your agenda, there are some strict reporting conditions for the government for this money. It says, in confirming this funding, the DFT have introduced new reporting requirements which will allow local people to see for themselves how the additional money is being spent. These include that all local authorities receiving this funding should publish by March 24 a summary of the additional resurfacing work they will deliver with the new funding over the next 2 years. Thereafter, publish quarterly reports, publish later in 24/5 a long-term plan for their use of the full 11-year funding. You'll see that, page 86, 4.3. Last year, Chairman, to much fanfare, the predecessor of the current portfolio holder announced an additional 1.5 million was to be spent, quote, sprucing up and improving our roads. I can't remember any scrutiny on how that 1.5 million was spent, where it was spent. Was it equitably spent across the area covered by the council? Looking at the government's desire to scrutinise this new funding, given the clear criteria for determining best value set by government for this new injection, when will the executive be analysing the 1.5 million already spent in the last months against the government's criteria in 4.3 for this additional funding? There does need to be scrutiny, and as I go around the area, people are not saying that they are running on roads without potholes, and quite frankly, the roads are the worst that I've ever known in my life. So we need a bit of scrutiny to understand how we're spending our money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hakewill. I would now like to invite Councillor Matthew Binley, Executive Member for Highways, Travel and Assets, to introduce the report. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will try and pick up as many of the points as possible before going on to my report, albeit some of those things are already covered in my report. So, first of all, Councillor Buckingham, thank you very much for your comments. You're absolutely right. This is very welcome. We're never going to stare a gift horse in the mouth. How things are selected, which was one of your points, and Councillor Maxwell, that was also one of your points, and Councillor Hakewill, you've also discussed it as well. One of the things is, of course, as has already been highlighted, this report does cover off the fact that we are going to be able to publish a works plan, a works programme, as to exactly what's going to be carried out, so that it's able to show the public, not only for this local authority, but for all of the local authorities who are benefactors from this additional funding, exactly how the taxpayers' money is being spent, and also to provide progress reports on that. Now, when we're talking about how things are selected in this area, again, the report does talk about it, so I'm going to try not to steal too much from what I'm about to say. However, one of the things is there's a system that we use which is called Horizon, and that is a system whereby there's an awful lot of data that's programmed into there. There's information such as reports from members of the public, how many complaints that we're getting about a certain stretch of road, how many potholes we've been going to fix, off the back of surveys carried out by our highways team. So all of that is plugged into that system, and that system is sort of the thing that decides, right, okay, well, what are some of the absolute priority roads that we need to sort out? The piece from Councillor Hakewill with regards to the funding and how that works from HS2, etc., and the government, I think that's a question for your local MP that you may wish to raise with them. You rightly raised the previous money, the 1.5 million from my predecessor, who presented a previous report to executive. That money, that was quite clearly spent in that there was a list that was provided, a schedule of works, and that was discussed. I even remember that being discussed at full council. So I know that has been discussed, and well, I don't think you get any more scrutiny than a full council, do you? So, especially as that's every member and not just a few that sit on the scrutiny panels. I'm also aware that, of course, the highways contract was in the Place and Economy Scrutiny Committee on the 19th, because I watched it. And I know that Horizon was talked about there when it was discussed how do we decide what works are prioritised. I know that you were also present, Councillor Hakewill. So when we talk about the scrutiny of highways and how that money is spent, that opportunity is there. You've had one this week. I'm sure there are going to be plenty more opportunities to scrutinise highways and how that money is spent. I know from certainly from talking to your chair that that's not the one and only time that highways will be discussed at that scrutiny committee. Madam Chair, now moving on to presenting my report. So this report is to seek approval to add the 1.069 million of government funding derived from the cancellation of the HS2 Northern Phase 2, as it's referred to the capital programme of highways maintenance to the 23-24 in-year budget and for the 24-25 financial year. The funding is part of an 11-year government investment plan into the roads, and the current list of works will be assessed to determine which works will be delivered. The works will be based on current priorities in the list of identified schemes, and this will be in accordance with the Northamptonshire Asset Management Plan and the Network Management Plan. The Department for Transport have introduced that by March 2024, the requirement that we publish a summary of the additional resurfacing works that will be delivered from the funding over the next 2 years, and we will then be required to publish a quarterly update and these reports will detail what has been completed and which roads have been resurfaced. Then later on in the 24-25 financial year, we're required to publish that long-term plan detailing the usage of the full 11-year funding programme, as Councillor Hakewell rightly mentioned earlier. The funding can be used for resurfacing schemes, inlay patching and permanent repairs to potholes. So there are a number of different uses that this money can be utilised for. Chair, it's quite a short paper really, it's as it says on the tin, therefore I'd like to move the recommendations made out in section 3.1 for the reasons set out in 3.2.
Many thanks, Councillor Binley. I'd now like to invite member debate from the floor. I have Councillor Brackenbury first to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And no, I welcome this report and thank you, Councillor Binley, for your detailed explanation of it. I welcome the report and the fact that the funding has got such detailed reporting requirements is very much to be welcomed, as Councillor Hakewell absolutely rightly pointed out. And just also to say that Keir and the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, for Place and Economy, attended a detailed session of a Place and Economy Scrutiny Committee on the 19th. There was a lengthy presentation made, and I think that the debate from Scrutiny was considered very useful both by Keir and by officers of North Northamptonshire Council, which I think underpins the fact that that scrutiny was indeed very much welcomed. So we very much look forward to coming up with the detail of what resurfacing and pothole filling in and bump smoothing and who knows what that will be connected to this funding, and I am sure that members of the council, wherever they come from in North Northamptonshire, will be very interested to see what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. It's always very positive to receive funding from any avenue, really, in this council. I think we should be grateful for any money that we receive, quite frankly, and if we can put it to good use, then that's always a benefit to everybody throughout the whole of North Northamptonshire. So, yeah, I can't see any more speakers. So with that, thank you, Councillor Binley. You've moved the recommendations. I'd now like to call on a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. The recommendations are set out on page 86 of the agenda pack. And they've been moved and seconded, and may I see a show of hands in favour, please?
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. We're moving on to agenda item 9, which is Northamptonshire Safeguarding Children Partnership Annual Report 22-23. And I'd like to invite Councillor Anne Lee to address the meeting. Councillor Lee, you have the usual 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Right, this report is very welcome. It's interesting, but it's actually quite old. The figures go up to March 23, and that actually makes it interesting to compare the measure that I referred to earlier. As you say, there is a difference in time. So on page 102, it gives, in the purple figure on the right, it gives the figure of 60% of child protection conferences being completed within 15 days of the strategy discussion. And then now, 6 months later, that is 21.5%. Now, if that KPI wasn't that important, why do we have it in our list of KPIs? Now, on page 94, we have the amount of money that's contributed by 4 of the members of the Northland Safeguarding Children Partnership, and that adds up to 142,946, barely 3 times the 50,000 that's been quoted to run a site in Rothwell that's not going to be used that much. 142,000 is what we contribute for our children, to safeguard our children, not as an operational agency, I understand, but just to coordinate it. Do we know, are we aware of the huge crisis with children at the moment? The focus of the local action partnerships is early intervention children. How many people are employed by this partnership? I'm just concerned that we are not getting the full story here, that the report is sanitized. The chairman's letter is actually very interesting, but I do think there's a crisis here that we really need to address. And us as councillors, it'd be good to remain informed, to get reports, more reports, and on time, soon after they're completed, even if they're not presented here, if they're just sent to us, so that we're aware of what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Dorothy Maxwell to address the meeting again, and you have the same 3 minutes, and please remember to speak into the mic, Councillor Maxwell. Thank you. Councillor Maxwell, can you turn it on, please? Thank you.
Wouldn't it? Sorry. Sorry about that. Right. This is a great report which supports children into the future and ensures that they will be protected. If it's carried through, it will make sure that children have a voice. Their learning will always be taken into account. The schools will take more notice if their role in ensuring safeguarding and learning is successful. Will there be money available to see this through? Will schools have access to this? Will it prevent children from carrying knives or in being involved with the police? How many staff will be involved in ensuring this happens? Lastly, I am pleased their voice will be heard and taken notice of, and not seen but heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Scott Edwards, excuse me, Executive Member for Children, Families, Education and Skills, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. And just to answer, so Councillor Lee, thank you. Because it is an annual report, we get it when the annual report is published. So again, it's all the different authorities that work with it until we get it. So we can't insist that it has to be published in April. It's all the statistics and everything that come together, but we get it as soon as we possibly can to present it here as executive, and that's the first time we see it as well. Absolutely, children are important. The safety of our children are important, and I don't think there are any councillors, any employees that don't understand this at all. We are trying to do everything we possibly can with all the different organisations to ensure that every child is safe within Northamptonshire. I know we're talking about Northants here, but it is Northamptonshire as a whole. Early intervention, absolutely, and I know I've spoken to you about early intervention many a times, and it is absolutely important. So you'll have noticed in the report that the money that is being spent on early intervention, the early intervention strategies, which are coming out, I think, in February of next year from both councils, so North and West. So they will include that. You will know, and I know we talk about family hubs a lot, so within that you will also see the hub that is being opened in Northampton to deal with vulnerable children that get mixed up with gangs and exploited, so that is happening within that as well. So a lot of work is being done. More can be done, absolutely, but we are working with those relevant authorities to get that done, to look after our children that are vulnerable. In answer to the question, I think actually Councillor Maxwell also asked a question about how many staff are involved with this. So the Safeguarding Board is is an administrative group. So I can't answer how many people, because obviously the police have thousands of people that are involved with it, and each of those are involved with safeguarding children. Likewise, Northants, likewise West Northants and the Children's Trust. So everybody is involved within safeguarding children, so there isn't a definite amount of employees employed by the Safeguarding Trust, if that makes sense. Councillor Maxwell, absolutely the voice of the children. It is the most important thing that the children should be heard, not just seen. You're absolutely right, they should be heard. And I think this report reflects that as well. And we're doing everything, again, to get the voice of the children over, to understand them. Schools, so you will have seen in the report, so they have employed 2 school links to go into schools and to liaise with schools about safeguarding. So one in the north, one in the west, which is a huge improvement on what has been in before, because children are at school for the majority of the time. So it is those teachers, it is the teachers and assistants, it is the dinner ladies that get to see and get to hear what could possibly be happening to our children. So the link is there between the north and the west, and MASH now as well. And the knife strategy. So it is horrendous, knives. So we are working with the police to develop this. We are working with going into schools to educate about knives. We are working with local community groups as well to educate more about the knives and to get the knives off the street. So the purpose of this report is to present the Northamptonshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership Annual Report 22 to 23, which outlines the partnership's achievements during the reporting year. North Northamptonshire Council is one of the 5 strategic leads representing the multi-agency Safeguarding Children's Partnership, which is a statutory requirement of working together to safeguard children. The purpose of the partnership is to safeguard and promote the welfare of children in Northamptonshire. This is done by coordinating the work of those people and all organisations working in the county, ensuring that what they do is effective. The purpose of the partnership is to support and enable local agencies to work together in a system where excellent practice is the norm, partner agencies hold one another to account effectively, there is early indication of a new safeguarding issues, learning is promoted and embedded, information is shared effectively, and the public can feel confident that children are protected from harm. In addition, the Safeguarding Partnership values are a child-centred approach to safeguarding, ensuring their voice is heard and understood, effective ways to identify and support children and families who would benefit from early help, a culture of continuous review and learning, and constructive and mutual challenge between partners to keep children safe. The 3 priorities set out in the business plan is taking positive action early enough to protect children. So I think that comes under what you were talking about, Councillor Lee. To support children, young people and families at risk of exploitation, and to work effectively as a partnership and support our staff. You will see that North Northamptonshire contributes £24,646 to the annual budget. Some statistics from the report. So 46,624 contacts were received last year, which is 3,100 more than the previous year. 63% of our care leavers were in education, employment or training. And I know that we've talked a lot about this during executive meetings about how we can increase that number with apprenticeships and getting those care leavers on board. Neglect is the main abuse category in child protection plans and the highest reason why children come into care. Neglect is seen as a priority for the whole partnership, and neglect subgroup has been created to coordinate a multi-agency response. Family hubs has been introduced and work has been undertaken in vital areas. Knife crime is a priority for the police and measures have been put into place. And a child exploitation hub is in development to work with all children affected. The report shows that work has been done, but also work that needs to be renewed. I'd like to ask you to look at the recommendations at 3.1 to note this report.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Right, I would like to now open it up to the floor, so member for debate. Councillor Harrison, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Edwards, for your report. I just wanted to add really to that this report went to the Health and Wellbeing Board 2 weeks ago and was very much welcomed by the board. It was felt that the report was stronger and of a higher quality this year, which gave us greater assurance around the work that is being done. And personally, I'd just like to say, and I know this was raised in the Health and Wellbeing Board the previous year, and has been added to this report, and I really like it, is the case studies that are detailed in there, because I think they really bring to life the experiences of some of our children and young people, and it's just really important for us to be able to see that in that report and understand that. So thank you, and I welcome the report.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Harrison. Looking around the room, I think that's everyone. Thank you. So the report is for noting, I see. So you are proposing that we note the report, Councillor Edwards. Can I see a second? Councillor Harrison is seconding the noting. So the recommendations to note the report are set out on page 92 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Please may I see a show of hands in favour?
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to just pause the meeting for a short comfort break. Thank you very much.
think we're good to go, Chair.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Right, we'll move straight on to agenda item 10, which is draft budget for 24-25 and medium-term financial plan. And I'd like to invite Councillor Lynn Buckingham to address the meeting in the usual 3 minutes. Councillor Buckingham, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I note with disappointment, start off on a positive. We welcome this budget, draft budget, but we note with disappointment that it's only a one-year grant again, and that is so difficult to plan around for any organisation, but one the size of North Northants Council, it's even worse. Also note the service grant, which is virtually taking £1 million out of the draft budget, because it was a predicted 300,000+ savings to a deficit of 7.78 million. And we note that the smoothing reserve coming in, obviously we'll be discussing this under the budget scrutiny session, so we look forward to that. But note with disappointment those things that I've already mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckingham. I'd now like to invite Councillor Hakewill to address the meeting, the usual 3 minutes. Councillor Hakewill.
Thank you, Chairman. First question is, when will the Executive hold face-to-face meetings around the area's towns to personally explain the draft budgets to members of the community rather than relying on meetings and YouTube? I note in item 6, 6.1 to 6.3, that's page 166 of your agenda. Fees and charges. The income that the council derives from fees and charges is important to support the council's services. The council's fees and charges have been reviewed for 24/5, and any changes to income assumptions have been included within the council's medium-term financial plan. 6.2, uplifts may be applied in line with inflationary increases where applicable, or other guidance as appropriate. 6.3, fees and charges are set in accordance with the Council's constitution, which requires any changes to be agreed by the respective executive member portfolio holder in conjunction with the executive director and assistant director for the relevant area. All good bureaucratic stuff. These are a very significant number of costs for valued services that are being raised effectively behind closed doors. What involvement have portfolio holders had in agreeing these additional charges to the community? When will the executive be asking scrutiny to look at the implications of these charges for our residents and businesses in the year 24-25? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hakewill. I'd now like to invite Councillor Lloyd Bundy, Executive Member for Finance and Transformation, to introduce the report, including the addendum published yesterday following the publication of the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement on the 18th of December.
Thank you, Chair. In answer to Councillor Buckingham's comments, I think we're all frustrated as far as that goes. I'll be referring to some of that. As far as Councillor Hakewill's comments, first of all, we have an awful lot of meetings, scrutiny meetings, and we have full council, and we have this executive where people can turn up, people can actually dial in online to actually see what's going on. And as far as fees and charges goes, as the Constitution says, the portfolio holders do have reference to those decisions. So I don't see what Councillor Hakel was talking about when he suggested that portfolio holders don't see what the increase in fees and charges are. Chair, this report sets out the draft budget for 24-25 and the medium-term financial plan to the year 2028-2029. If the Executive approves the recommendations at paragraph 3.1, this will form the basis for the consultation process. Residents, local partners and other stakeholders will have the opportunity to review and propose the proposed budget and provide feedback during the 5-week consultation period, which will run until the 26th of January next year. The draft budget will also be presented to the Corporate Scrutiny Committee during January for their feedback. Considering the comments from the Corporate Scrutiny Committee and the wider consultation response, the Executive, at their meeting on the 8th of February 2024, will consider the final draft budget proposals and the council tax levels for 24-25 for recommendation to Council at its budget meeting on the 22nd of February 2024. This will also contain the formal information from all the precepting authorities required to propose the council tax for all the areas of North Northamptonshire. May I once again urge everyone who has an opinion about this budget to use the time of consultation to share their thoughts. This council provides a wide range of services to the residents of North Northamptonshire, including care to the vulnerable, adults and children, education, the disposal and collection of waste, household waste recycling, economic development, housing, and the support for the homeless. The budget will underpin the priorities contained within the Council's corporate plan. When this proposal was published, this Council, like every other up and down the country, was awaiting the government settlement. This Council, like many others, is facing financial pressures, risks and uncertainties over the short and medium term. The failure of government to provide a forecasted settlement over several years has added to this uncertainty. The government financial policy that was issued on the 5th of December, which is the precursor to the settlement being announced, has made it clear that the settlement will be one of funding by growth and not new or increased grant funding. Last Monday, government published the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement. Following this, an addendum to the report was published yesterday, setting out the revised financial position for North Northamptonshire Council, comparing the settlement to the assumptions within the draft budget report that is being considered by Executive today. The settlement represents a 6.5% or £4 billion increase in national core spending power. Whilst this is helpful, the high levels of inflation and demand growth has resulted in significant pressures across council services, which has outstripped this increase and requires further savings to be found. The table at paragraph 2.2 of the addendum sets out the core spending power by class of authority. Paragraph 2.10 of the addendum sets out the main points of the settlement. As per the addendum, I am proposing to add the recommendation requesting Executive to note the changes to the draft budget arriving from the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement. No one could have predicted the financial challenges that have been faced over the last few years, mainly through external factors such as the long-term impact of the pandemic on residents' needs and sustained high inflation. Although the draft budget being presented today is balanced, the Council's medium-term financial position remains very challenging, and it must continue to deliver further transformation opportunities to help create a strong, modern council delivering quality, cost-effective services for the benefits of its residents. This budget outlines an estimated net revenue of £759.6 million, including a designated schools grant of £388.1 million. This is set out in the table at paragraph 5.1. And as I have just said, all this shows a balanced budget for 24-25. Members should recognise a funding gap of £36 million for 25-26, rising to £83.6 million by the end of the 28 financial year. Approximately half of the growth in the core spending power in the government settlement will come from local taxpayers through council tax increases. This draft budget assumes that the council will increase council tax by 4.99%, 2.99% for the core council tax and 2% for the adult social care precept. There are 157,670 domestic properties in North Northamptonshire. The majority of these are either Band A or Band B. I announced at full council that this equates to 117,611 equivalent Band D properties, and after adjustments, a tax base of 115,847. The proposed council tax for a Band D property will be £1,740.22, an increase of £82.71 per year or £1.59 per week. A Band A increase will be £1.06 and a Band B £1.23. May I remind members that full council accepted the recommendation to maintain the local council tax support scheme at 25%. The second largest income source for this council is business rates, which amounts to £110.5 million. North Northamptonshire has benefited well under the present business rates retention system due to an above-average increase in business growth across its area. The way that the business rates retention scheme operates in future years could have major financial implications for this council. This council could be affected by the resetting of the point from which growth is measured, funding levels, growth of businesses, the number of businesses ceasing to trade, or a reduction in collection rate. The Dedicated Schools Grant is a ring-fence grant allocated to local authorities by the government to support a range of education-related services. The Department of Education currently operates a 4-block funding model as set out in paragraph 5.44. It is forecasted that the high needs block will overspend at the end of 23-24. Discussions with the Schools Forum and the Department of Education as how this can be mitigated is being carried out. Directorate budgets are summarised at section 7 of the report. As always, demand-led services are the ones that are the most volatile and indeed carry the highest risk. During this financial year, we are already seeing significant overspends in both children's and adult social care services. We recognise that the safeguarding and care of the most vulnerable in our society is important in all that we do. However, we must also work hard to stay within the resources that are available to us so that all services are protected for our communities. We realise that tackling overspends and implementing change can take time, and the position may get worse before it gets better. But it is necessary that service reviews how they operate and look for greater efficiencies going forward. This way we can ensure long-term financial sustainability and in doing so the ability to continue the delivery of the services that our residents value. Northamptonshire Children's Trust has been delivering children's service care, social care and targeted early help on behalf of Northamptonshire councils, formerly on behalf of Northamptonshire County Council, and since the 1st of April, North and West Northamptonshire. The Trust is funded predominantly from the 2 unitary authorities by means of an agreed contract sum. The initial contract sum was submitted on the 15th of September 2023, which was in accordance with the contract. The Intelligent Client function led a working party which held regular meetings to undertake a detailed review of the contract submission. This resulted in a final contract sum being presented to the strategic group at the meeting on the 28th of November and will be presented to Northamptonshire Children's Trust Joint Committee. As part of delivering the contract sum for 24-25, a Transformation and Efficiency Board has been created between the 2 unitary authorities and the Trust. The board aims to create a systemic improvement in services for children in Northamptonshire whilst driving value for money to ensure that the resources are used effectively to support and improve outcomes. The contract sum for the Children's Trust is agreed at £177.4 million. of which North Northants Council share is £78.6 million. In negotiating the contract sum for the Children's Trust, it was felt that the stronger governance arrangements could be put in place in order to consider and improve transformation business cases. This is defined as Block 2 within the budget proposals and referenced in the table at paragraph 7.18 of the 24-25. This equates to around about £5.9 million county-wide. Of this, 2.6 is for transformation activity already agreed, and the remaining 3.3, of which £1.3 million is funded from North Northamptonshire, is available for investment against approved schemes. Paragraph 7.14 sets out the principles of the board, and 7.15 sets out the proposed scheme of delegation, which is also in the recommendations at paragraph 3.1f. The contract sum has increased from 23-24 by £32.362 million to £183.3 billion. North Northamptonshire's share of this is 14.291. The Children's Directorate draft budget includes the Children's Trust reflects a net pressure of £15.231 million, of which 14.373 relates to the Children's Trust and 858,000 to the Children's Services delivered within North Northants Council. The Adult Social Care draft budget reflects a net pressure of £15.73 million. The main pressure includes contractual inflation and other increases for independent care placements, which incorporates the national living wage pressure for social care providers. The projected inflation requirement of £3.988 million includes the provision for, I've read that twice, wage, in line with the announcement by government and other overheads, as well as general fee movements in line with market factors. Within adult social care, there is a provision for demographic growth of £11.15 million. North Northamptonshire has seen a significant increase in the number of clients requiring care. Additional costs are included of £1.498 million for the ring-fence grant funding to meet social care-related demand in respect of discharge and capacity funding. There's a further £1.078 million in support of discharge. This grant is part of an overall allocation of £1 billion to get people out of hospital on time and into care settings. A ring-fence grant of £1.078 million for the funding to support adult social care workforce. It is recognised that risk remains in the budget assumptions for adult social care due to the influence of the demand within the system. A reserve is set aside to help underwrite such risk and to smooth any impact over the longer term, whilst alternative mitigations are sought. The main savings within adult social care are in the reduction of the number of residential placements made in the independent sector, owing to the increase in the utilisation of beds in PPP properties of £695,000 and demand management efficiencies of £2.6 million. Pressures and savings within strategic housing, development and property services include a pressure of £500,000 to address the increase in homelessness demands and the use of grants to allow for £375,000 of efficiencies. The draft net revenue budget for 24-25 for public health and communities is £8.553 million. The public health grant allocation are usually announced in the new year. At this stage, no change has been made to the grant assumptions, although it is anticipated that there will be an increase to keep pace with inflation. The grant is ring-fenced, and any increase for funding will remain held against the Public Health Service to fund additional costs and service priorities. The main pressure within communities and leisure is £244,000 and relates to the increase in running costs and the repair and maintenance costs associated with leisure facilities. There are savings of £400,000 due to changes in the VAT legislation. Health reserves for the 3 years, 121,000 pounds, and community wellbeing grants to be funded by public health grants in line with the health and wellbeing strategy of 120,000 pounds. The Place and Economy Directorate draft budget reflects pressures of £5.849 million and savings of £5.317 million, resulting in a net pressure of £532,000. In total, there is £3.46 million for contract changes and other inflation, which includes home-to-school transport of £1.415 million, street lighting PFI energy contract inflation of £277,000, waste management contract inflation of £1.212 million, and other general contract inflation of £556,000. A £450,000 pressure within planning and development services to address the legacy issues relating to staffing budgets. There's an income pressure of £442,000 associated with one-off rental pressures for the commercial property portfolio, which is to be funded from reserves. The Directorate has a number of demographic volume changes totalling £1.01 million, which includes £395,000 for changes to waste management costs, £550,000 for highways maintenance service. There's also a pressure of £65,000 relating to enhanced provision of the Traveller Unit. The main savings include statutory planning fees, increases, additional income derived from dedicated routes to aid traffic flow across North Northamptonshire, garden waste harmonisation and subscription services, and a reduction in utility inflation. Enabling and support services reflects a pressure of £2.655 million, which includes costs associated with the delivery of the IT strategy, contract and staff inflation incurred on service delivery by West Northamptonshire Council. Costs associated with the implementation of new systems, inflationary increases of licence renewals, the removal of legacy income budgets not now deliverable, and the inflation on lead authority support services. It also reflects savings of £6.979 million, including the increase in investment income, realignment of income and changes in fees and charges to the Children's Trust. Investment income of £4.697 million reflects the increase in the Bank of England base rate on future investments and is based on an average cash balance of £157 million as a weighted average rate of 5.01% for a full year. The Corporate Resources revenue budget for 24-25 is £34.397 million, showing in the table at paragraph 8.1. Amongst other items, this holds a corporate contingency of around 1% of the revenue budget. MRP, which is required to fund borrowing on maturity and contingency for future pay awards. It also reflects the uncertainty of future insurance costs. The Council's Treasury Management debt portfolio and other associated Treasury Management costs are £12.5 million. There continues to be risks around the overall cash and loan position for North Northamptonshire, not only from volatile marketplace, but also due to the outstanding legacy audits for 2021 and the disaggregation of the opening position for Northamptonshire County Council. In his written statement to Parliament, when announcing the settlement, the Secretary of State highlighted that the government continues to encourage local authorities to consider, where possible, the use of their reserves to maintain services in the face of service pressures. The table at paragraph 9.3 sets out the Council's reserves. Most reserves are earmarked for specific purposes or ring-fenced. The Council holds just over £24 million of general reserves, which provide a working balance to help cushion the impact of unexpected events or emergencies. As I remind members constantly, once reserves are spent, they are gone, and so a strategy for replenishing any reserve that is to be used must be in place. The second recommendation in the addendum that I am proposing is to approve the use of the budget delivery smoothing reserve to meet the net shortfall in funding of £7.748 million arising from predominantly from the reduction to the service grant, noting that further work will now be undertaken to look at options to meet this shortfall on a recurring basis. The reserve strategy, including a range for the level of general fund balances, must be between a minimum of 5% and a maximum of 10% of the net revenue budget. The level of reserves included in this budget are £24.2 million, which represents 6.5% of the proposed net revenue budget of £371.5 million. With these two extra proposals added from the addendum into the full report, Chair, I am happy to recommend the propose the recommendations of paragraph 3.1.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Bundy. It was quite an epic report, but very comprehensive, I would say. So I'd now like to open it up to the floor and invite members for the debate. Is there anybody wishing to speak on the paper? Thank you. Councillor Brackenbury.
Well, thank you, Councillor Bundy, for a tour through the finances of the council, the government, and many other sources as well. But actually, it was a very comprehensive overview, and it does certainly give some cause for concern. I appreciate the hard work that the team has made and all the directorates have made to come to the satisfactory position that we have of a balanced budget for this year. But of course, the dance will start again, no doubt, for next year. So, you know, it is disappointing that the local government settlement is, of course, on an annual basis, and there isn't the sort of long-term thinking that can come from a longer-term settlement. But I know this matter is being taken up. No, I mean, I welcome the position we are in at least in the short, medium term. As far as the consultation is concerned, I very much welcome that, and once this draft budget is agreed by executive, if it is agreed by executive, then that consultation immediately takes place. And as with yourself, Councillor Bundy, I absolutely urge any interested individual or stakeholder to contribute to that consultation, which will inform the decisions which we will have to take at full council in due course. So, as I say, I do think that the finance team should be commended for the amazing amount of hard work that goes into putting this budget together. I do think that the individual directorates should be commended for the hard work that they've had. I mean, certainly in my area, and I know colleagues around the table will agree, that we've all had to tighten our belts very substantially. It's never easy. There are always unfortunate choices that have to be made, but we are where we are, and I commend the report to executive. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Binley.
Thank you, Chair. I won't rehash everything that Councillor Brackenbury's just said, because I completely concur with his comments about the huge amount of hard work and effort that's gone into this. Not only, of course, from the finance team, but also all of the directorates. I think all of us around this table can appreciate the amount of hours that not only we as elected members have put into this, working with our directorates, but all of the officers within the council, and also how we have had challenging conversations, and we as elected members have challenged over certain areas to best represent the people of Northamptonshire. And of course, again, just to reiterate, we are, of course, frustrated about the one-year settlement. I note that the leader has made a public statement on that today. So I think he's made the feelings of the council very, very clear in that. I do really welcome this balanced budget. It is challenging. I'm ever so pleased to see that we are not in a position that others find themselves in. And that is absolutely to be commended. And I completely agree with your comments, Councillor Bundy, about not taking money out of reserves, because you never know what's going to come around the corner, whether it be a pandemic, a war that destabilises the global economy. Who knows what might be next? Let's hope nothing for a good few years, but never say never. Of course, Chair, I know comments have been made about things being in the public arena and public meetings, etc. Well, I think number one, this is a public meeting. Public are welcome to attend and listen in and make comment. We have had public speakers today. And with regards to fees and charges, again, this is something that's taken up hours and hours of my time, certainly. I have hundreds of lines in the highways team to go through. And we have literally, with the executive directors, I have been through every single one of them to discuss them. You know, some are based on legislation requirements set by central government. Others we have based on inflation. And others have been based on the fact that they have, you know, for example, some have not been reviewed, and especially when it comes to things like disaggregation. So we now have control over certain things, and we are therefore looking at them. But we have spent hours and hours and hours on that. And we do have to remember, as has been pointed out with the report, we do operate an executive model at this council. That is how we make these decisions. There, of course, is always an element of public consultation. There is always an element of scrutiny involved. But we have to make those decisions based on that model that we operate. And also, let's remember, this is a democracy. We are elected by members of the public to represent them. We do not go out to consult every single thing that we do on a day-to-day basis, because that's why we've been elected, to stop that happening. Otherwise, throw democracy out the window and have a completely different model where everything's decided by public consultation. Very, very little will happen, because it will take so long. So I really do welcome this report, and I thank all of the officers for all of their hard work that they've put into this.
Thank you, Councillor Binley. Yes, I'd just like to echo as well. You know, it's always a challenging time to get to a balanced budget, and we have all worked really, really hard, especially the officers. And thank you from all of us again to the officers, and especially the finance team, for really drilling down and really pushing each department to make those savings so that we as a council can bring forward a truly balanced budget. So yes, thank you very much. And yeah, so right, moving forward, I don't see any further comments from anybody. So I'm presuming that Councillor Bundy, you are proposing your paper, and I'll call on a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Brackenbury. That's for the recommendations in this report, but I also, I'll take the addendum separately, if that's okay. So we'll go to, we'll take the recommendations set out on page 44 and 45 of the agenda pack first, and then we'll do the addendum second. So I've had a mover and a seconder for that. So can I see a show of hands, please? Thank you.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And now then we're looking at the recommendations on page 8 of the addendum. I've got a mover, Councillor Bundy, and Councillor Brackenbury. Are happy to second that also. Thank you. And can I see a show of hands for that also, please?
Also unanimous, Chair.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Right, thank you. Moving forward, we're on to agenda item 11, Housing Revenue Account Draft Budget, HRA, 24-25, and Medium-Term Financial Plan Proposals. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Lynn Buckingham to address the meeting, and the usual 3 minutes. Councillor Buckingham, thank you.
Thank you. This year, rents, council rents are due to rise by 7.7%. Obviously, this is a government formula of CPI in September plus 1%. However, we are still in the middle of a cost of living crisis. And what we don't have is the impact that's happening on our tenants with these rent increases. So we don't know if the levels of rent arrears have gone up. We don't know about evictions for rent arrears. We don't even have a Truth Poverty Commission to be able to give us information about what's happening on the ground. Yes, we do have household support funding, but not everybody applies for those, or those that apply for it don't always get it. This is all on the back of, as in one of the last reports we had on the HRA, £16 million of savings for the HRA. What is it we're doing? What are we achieving? Are we getting or giving our tenants the right? And we don't have to put the rents up by 7.7. We can go for a lower amount. Yes, we might have to put it up next year or the year after that, and it all has an impact. But we don't know the impact it's having on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckingham. Yes, right, so I'd now like to invite Councillor Bunday, the Executive Member for Finance and Transformation, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. The rent levels are also take into consideration how much, how collectible the rents are. Can I just point out to Councillor Buckingham that any rent increases, any contribution from the rent is actually ring-fenced within the account, and so as a consequence, the benefit from rent increases are the people who live in that accommodation. Going on to my report, the housing revenue account is a separate ring-fenced account within the council for the income and expenditure associated with its housing stock. The HRA does not directly impact the council's wider general fund budget or on the level of council tax. Income to the HRA is primarily received through the rents and other charges paid by the tenants and leaseholders. Although at present we are running two neighbourhood accounts, we are required to move towards consolidating them into one account. The council has started to move towards consolidation of the two accounts. This is a substantial piece of work and will require a 30-year business plan to be produced that will be informed by the housing strategy for North Northamptonshire that is currently being developed. The draft housing revenue budget were presented to the Tenants Advisory Panel on the 16th of November, and they will further meet on the 18th of next month ahead of making formal recommendations pertaining to rent levels and the budget itself to the Executive for their meeting on the 8th of February. The Corporate Scrutiny will also be invited to consider it at their meeting on the 23rd of January. Following this recommendations by Executive will be made to full Council on the 22nd of February, with Council being invited to approve the 24-25 housing revenue account budget consisting of the Corby neighbourhood account and the Kettering neighbourhood account, and increased dwelling rents of 24-25 for both Corby and Kettering. The Housing Revenue Account Medium-Term Financial Plan consisting of the Corby Neighbourhood Account and the Kettering Neighbourhood Account for 24-25 is also included. The two neighbourhood accounts own 8,132 properties consisting of 1, 2, 3 and 4 plus bedroomed flats, houses and bungalows. East Northampton Wellingborough councils had no housing stock, having made the decision several years ago to sell their stock. The council is required by law to avoid budgeting for a deficit on the HRA, so the budget must not be based on the total HRA revenue reserves falling below zero. In practice, the council is expected to maintain a reasonable balance of HRA reserves to cover contingencies. The Chief Finance Officer reviews the level of balances required to support the Housing Revenue Account spend annually as part of their risk assessment of the budget. The Executive Director for Finance and Performance has assessed the minimum level of balances, taking all known risks into account, and said that they should remain unchanged at £80,000 for the Corby neighbourhood account and £650,000 for the Kettering neighbourhood account. The minimum balance for the two neighbourhood accounts are around 3.5% of the total budget. Details of reserves, together with estimated movements, are set out in Appendix C. Numbers of right-to-buy properties and the numbers of empty properties must also be taken into account. The number of right-to-buy sales assumed during 23-24 and the medium term for Corby neighbourhood account is 40 and the Kettering neighbourhood account is 20. It is assumed that 0.9% of Corby neighbourhood housing stock and 2% of the Kettering neighbourhood housing stock will be void at any one time and therefore rent cannot be charged. This reduces the total income expected to be achieved by £205,000 for the Corby neighbourhood account and £375 for the Kettering neighbourhood account. Acquisition and new building programmes increase the number of housing stock for the HRA. It is anticipated that within the Kettering neighbourhood account, a further 8 homes will be delivered at the Grange during 24-25, and the part-year effect has been reflected in the revenue account for 24-25. Further schemes will be reflected in the medium-term financial plan when there is more certainty around the time delivery of these. The housing revenue account budget for 24-25 shows a balanced position for both Corby and Kettering neighbourhood accounts and separately, which amounts to a total overall budget of £42.425 million. The Corby neighbourhood account shows a deficit over the period of the medium-term financial plan to the end of 2028 financial year of £736,000, while over the same period the Kettering neighbourhood account shows a surplus of just over £2 million. The main reasons for the difference between the two neighbourhood accounts results from how the loans for self-financing was structured. The Corby neighbourhood account is increasing its contribution for the repayment of loans, whereas the Kettering neighbourhood account is reducing. To achieve a balanced state, the proposal is of an average rent increase of 7.7%. This is in line with recommendations from central government and amounts to an average increase of £6.68 and £7.05 per week for Corby and Kettering respectively. And with that, Chair, I'm happy to propose the recommendations of paragraph 3.
Thank you, Councillor Bundy. Now I'd like to invite member debate from the floor. Councillor Rowley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report, as everyone would expect. As Councillor Bundy said, we have to have a balanced budget for all budgets, but especially in the HRA. We can only use the funds from the rental income. Councillor Buckingham raised about a £16 million saving, but unfortunately I don't recognise that, so we'll talk afterwards as to where that came from. But one thing to bear in mind is if we do reduce the rent by 1%, yes, it will have a small saving for the residents, but it will have an impact of £11 million over the 30-year projected plan, which is a significant loss of revenue and means that we can't continue the maintenance. We'll have to slow maintenance down. So we do need to increase the rent. It will go to the equivalent of the Tenants Forum for them to review and put their recommendation forward. Obviously, we'll look at that and see what they come up with, but unfortunately, that's the formula is 7.7, so we have to go with that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Councillor Binley.
Thank you very much, Chair. Of course, what I think we've got to do is, when we look at this, we've got to look at it in the round and look at it, looking back at our previous budgets that we had for the HRA. And in fact, those budgets that predate this authority as well, and what the government capped the rental increases at. So, the government previously had applied a rent cap below the rate of inflation over a number of years when it came to the HRAs. And of course, what that meant is that basically the budget within the HRA was not increased by the rate of inflation. Now, when we look at last year, the formula that was in place, that is in place, this year is the last year of that government formula being applied. But last year, again, the government changed it, because what it was supposed to be is it was meant to be the rate of inflation, and i.e. CPI plus 1%. But due to what that was looking at last year, considering what the CPI index was, I think originally it was 11.6%. It's since been revised down to 11.1%. If you apply the same formula, the rental increase within those tenants living in the HRA and also those affected by other housing associations would have been absolutely huge. So the government bucked the trend, bucked that formula, and they said, actually, no, we're not going to do that. So it went up by 7%, which meant that it was below the rate of inflation. However, what we did last year as a local authority is we did a huge amount of work investing into our housing stock. You know, there's an awful lot of work going on with our capital programme there to future-proof our housing stock, with things like Homes for the Future and the Sparkle programme. But we had a huge housing repair backlog to get through. We were not alone as a local authority in that. However, we took a very robust approach to it to make sure that backlog was completely cleared or as near to cleared as possible. And that programme's been going really, really well. So we've done an awful lot within the HRA, and what's happening this year is it's being proposed that, again, it reverts back to the previous formula of CPI plus 1%. But, of course, that won't mean that it plays catch-up even to last year and the, in effect, reduction that budget's seen. If we do apply a lower amount of a rental increase, then unfortunately what that would potentially mean is a lower service, and I don't think that's something that we want to be offering to our residents within our council houses. I do just want to pick up on something. I know Councillor Bunday mentioned about the work that's being done to merge the neighbourhood accounts. I do just want to make it absolutely abundantly clear, because there is still some confusion with members here on this, and I've heard it at previous scrutiny meetings. We operate one housing revenue account. We have two separate neighbourhood accounts, and what's being discussed is merging those two neighbourhood accounts. Unfortunately, I've heard members constantly refer to it as having two separate HRAs. We do not have two separate HRAs. We operate the one. Also, to be taken into consideration with this is the fact that I know, and again, Councillor Rowley, you'll probably know more about this than I do now, because I'm not portfolio holder anymore, but the empty property strategy that's being worked on, so that potentially will have an impact on this, but also the work that's done through prevention. And I know that evictions was mentioned by Councillor Buckingham, but of course we do have a rental income policy. Our rental income policy with regards to the HRA is very, very clear that it's not about going to eviction, it's about working with residents way before that even happens. And we do have a very, very hard-working housing options team who are really, really focused on that prevention side of working with people who are in private rented accommodation and various other accommodation, dealing with debts, helping provide them with support, liaising with their landlords to make sure that they're supported as much as possible, so that we work on that preventative side rather than the side of then having to try and find them housing through them applying on keyways. So I really, really welcome this report, Chair, and again, it's great to see how hard the team have worked on getting this budget balanced, and I do hope that the Tenants Forum support the 7.7% increase.
Thank you, Councillor Binley. I can't see any more members wishing to engage, so I will presume that Councillor Bundy, you are, I nearly forgot your name again then. Sorry. You are proposing the recommendations in the report. I call for a seconder, please. Councillor Harrison. Oh, sorry, Councillor Harrison. The recommendations are set on page 255 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Please may I see a show of hands in favour, please.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, moving on to agenda item 12, draft capital programme 24 to 28. I would like to invite Councillor Hakewill to address the meeting. Councillor Hakewill, the usual 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Therefore, I'll draw your attention to page 282 of your agenda today. 6.3.1, the following risks are associated with the budget proposals on page 282. It's unfortunate the typing there on that top one says at the bottom of mitigation, ensure sufficient contingency is built. I can't see the rest of that. I don't know if you can on your electronic versions. But anyway, you will see from the agenda, and anyone watching in will see that all of those mitigations are amber. There's nothing green about this particular budget situation. In the traffic light representation of risks, at the top one, how can you have amber red? It's either amber or it's red. And I would deduce that that top one, ensure projects are closely monitored and reviewed, increase costs, is red. I don't understand how you can have amber red. I've never seen a traffic light system that shows both. It's one or the other, and I would say it's red from everything I've heard this morning. Capital plans are there to improve the lives and vitality of our communities. It is not reasonable to herald the future delivery of these plans in the budgeting process and then continually fail to deliver. The last 3 years of this authority has massively underdelivered under capital projects. So how is the executive going to deliver this proposed programme given previous years have that massive underspend, including this year to date, which I think is 20 million underspent? There's no point in sitting here having a budget, whether you talk face-to-face to residents or listen on YouTube, to actually say this is what we're going to do and then constantly fail to achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hakewill. I would now like to invite Councillor Bundy, the Executive Member for Finance and Transformation, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. In answer to Councillor Hakewill's question, whenever I sit at a red traffic light, I'm then waiting for it to go red and amber before it goes to green. So that's an interesting one. The comments about deliverability of schemes, there are all sorts of things that have changed schemes that were suggested in the first place, bearing in mind that a lot of the original schemes were put forward by the legacy authorities before we became a unitary. And some of those schemes were identified as being deliverable in the first year and was probably should have been reprofiled over the medium-term financial plan. Other were aspirational schemes and just would never, ever have come to fruition. And you know, we've lived through a pandemic, we've lived through inflation, we've lived through, or we're living through wars around the world, which is affecting what we're doing and how we deliver things. And all those things put together does mean that some suggestions of 2 or 3 years ago are not deliverable today. This report sets out the baseline capital programme for 24-25 and the indicative medium-term financial plan for North Northamptonshire Council, with the draft budget proposal set out earlier, this will form part of the budget consultation if approved by Executive today. As I said earlier, it will be also presented to the Corporate Scrutiny Committee in January. Appendix A, Baseline Capital Programme 24-28. Appendix B shows the baseline HRA capital programme for the same period, and Appendix C shows the baseline development pool. The capital programme assumes various sources of funding, including capital receipts and grants, together with support from external and internal borrowing, which is at the discretion of the Council for essential capital expenditure. This is set out in Appendices A to C, as I've just said. The current capital strategy demonstrates how the Council will make expenditure and investment decisions in line with service objectives and properly take into account of stewardship, value for money, prudence, sustainability and affordability. The final capital strategy and treasury management strategy will be presented to full Council for approval in February. Paragraph 5.2 sets out the key principles underpinning this report. Paragraph 5.3 through 5.5 outlines the governance and approvals process for new capital schemes. The total capital programme is £163.5 million, consisting of a general fund baseline programme of £104.8 million and an HRA baseline programme totalling £58.7 million. There's also a development pool of £171.2 million, which includes schemes awaiting formal business cases. The General Fund Baseline Programme includes key projects such as highways, disabled adaptations, school improvements and extensions, and various property and environmental projects across North Northamptonshire, together with significant investment in the highways infrastructure network over and above the Integrated Transport Grant funding. The HRA Baseline Programme is across Kettering and Corby's housing stock, together with significant investment of £20.2 million proposed for the housing development and new build programmes. The development pool also holds projects that are indicative of future investment and will be subject to completing a satisfactory business case prior to the executive approval and inclusion within the formal programme. The following new investments have been put forward as part of the revised main programme for 24-25 for approval by Council. £9 million over 3 years period for 24-25 to up to 27-28, £3 million a year, funded from borrowing for investment into the highways infrastructure across North Northamptonshire. £1.3 million across 24-25 and 25-26 to develop a traveller temporary stopping site funded from borrowing. £123,000 investment into play facilities at Sywell Country Park during 24-25, funded again through capital receipts. £749,300 invested into Alfred Street Tennyson School. This has been moved from the development pool to the main programme and will be funded through DFE Basic Needs Grant. £125,000 to support the upgrading of the public library network, which will be met from capital receipts. The minimum revenue provision reflects the minimum amount a council must charge to the revenue budget each year to set aside a provision for repaying external borrowing. The increase in the provision of £1.735 million is to ensure that the provision is aligned to our policy moving into the medium term. This will form part of the Treasury Management Strategy that will be presented to the February Executive. The disaggregation of the capital assets, balances, debt and are still to be finalised and subject to the final certification audit of the 2021 financial accounts for Northamptonshire County Council and Corby Borough Council, and this may have implications for the current assumptions. With that, Chair, I'm happy to propose the recommendations of paragraph 3.
Thank you, Councillor Bunday. So I would like to invite member debate from the floor. Is anybody? No? Okay, fabulous. Thank you. We're all happy with that. I have a mover in Councillor Bundy. I'm looking for a seconder, please, for the report. Councillor Edwards, thank you. The recommendations set out on page 278 of the agenda pack, they've been moved and seconded. Please may I have a show of hands in favour?
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 13, Capital Programme Update 23-24. And I would like to... Councillor Anne Lee, I think, has left the building, so I can't see her. No. Okay, thank you. Then I would like to invite Councillor Jim Hakewell to address the meeting. Councillor Hakewell, the usual 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Capital Programme Update, which is page 298, 3.1, recommended that the Executive... You'll be really pleased to know, I'm very pleased, that Monsai Academy in Rothwell has repurposed the sum of £135,000 to go towards the multi-use games area, which is a project that has been ongoing for some time. Equally in there, little 3IA is the Isham bypass environment of 0.790 million. So I welcome the Monsai funding. I'd like to know, is that coming from Section 106 or another stream of capital funding? What was the reasoning for the timing of the additional funding for the Isham bypass? Why was it a single-member decision of the leader when processes for allocating this capital could have gone through the normal allocation process and be considered along with all other capital funding? I just don't get the timing of that a week or two ago as a single-member decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hakewell. I'd like to pass this, invite Councillor Lloyd Bunday now, the Executive Member for Finance and Transformation, to introduce the report, and I'm sure we'll get round to answering some of your questions.
Thank you, Chair. There are 3 items for approval by the capital programme. One is the Local Authority Treescape Fund, which is budget approved in various years, and the scheme is funded through an external grant. The Burton Latimer Multi-Wheeled Sports Facility, which is being funded via a Section 106 contribution, and which is a virement from the Property Minor Works budget. The Local Highways Maintenance additional funding, which is DFT grant. The Monsai Academy, I believe that's coming from the high needs part of the DSG, but I will confirm that. And as far as the Isham bypass goes, that environment is there because central government changed the goalposts, and because they moved the goalposts, we needed to put in some more work on the feasibility study, and so that's where that's come from. And being fleet of foot, wanting the Isham bypass to please happen as quickly as possible, as all my colleagues keep telling me. So that's why it's been pulled through like that. And with that, Chair, I'm happy to propose those recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Bunday. Councillor Binley, have you down to speak?
Thank you very much, Chair. So just picking up on the Isham bypass piece. Not to rehash this, we've already discussed this in full council, and we discussed the timings and why, and of course I know that there were some, and I hasten to add, not today, I know it's not been made today, but when we were in full council there were some allegations made with regards to the timing, which were quite preposterous really. But as I say, I know that's not being said today, but why the timing, and why did it go to a single member to make decision? Well, it went to a single member, i.e. the leader, and also the chief executive to sign it off because it was classed as an emergency decision. The reason it was classed as an emergency decision was because there was not enough time to be able to wait to make said decision for it to go through the normal process of going to executive and then full council, hence why it is going a bit backwards, and it's already been to full council to sign off that decision, and it's being noted here today rather than it being discussed as a full paper. The reason why? Well, the government made an announcement that was unexpected, that had not been discussed with us prior to that announcement, as government tend to do in these situations, that the project would be fully funded. And as a result, we also have to submit updated traffic modelling, which is a changing requirement from the Department for Transport, and so all of it falls down to timings. And if we do not or did not move ahead with this in the way that we moved ahead with it, it would potentially further delay, well, it wouldn't potentially, it would further delay the project, but potentially mothball that project altogether, because it would mean that things would go on too long and costs, etc., would change too much if we are to continue to wait. Bearing in mind there's already an element of cost modelling that's been completed. There are many, many cogs in this machine that have to move along. You know, the next stages are about submitting the updated business case once, of course, we've done the new traffic modelling, and a planning application needs to be submitted as well. And there was a schedule attached as well, so we are aware of that schedule. That's even been published. I know that's been out in the public domain. I know that's been picked up on by the media and reported in the Telegraph. So if we didn't do it in the way that we did, that schedule would have been jeopardised and potentially put the entire project at risk again, and we don't want that. We needed to move ahead. We needed to deliver not only for the people of Isham, but for the people of North Northamptonshire, because it affects all people. It doesn't just affect the residents of Isham. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Binley. I think it's quite clear that sometimes this council needs to make decisions very quickly, and we have a process in place to allow that to happen, and that's exactly what happened. So, next speaker is Councillor Edwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I welcome this report. Montsey Academy, just to confirm, it's actually from Section 106 money, and it's repurposed Section 106 for a multi-games area. As Councillor Hakewell said, it's much needed at Montsey, and it will be a fantastic facility there. Coming from somebody who used to attend that school, I know the school very well and its needs. The second thing is the Burton Latimer multi-wheeled sports facility. This is a great community achievement. A couple of years ago, in fact, when I first took on the portfolio of children's, I attended a presentation at one of the Burton Latimer primary schools from two 8-year-old boys who put this proposal forward. And I'm really pleased to see it today in this report. Those two boys should be really proud of their achievements, that they have put this forward, got all the funding, got public behind them. It's amazing. And I will write to them to congratulate them, and I look forward to this being built. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Absolutely. This sounds fantastic. I think writing to them is a brilliant idea, and I'm sure they'll be pleased to hear that we're all fully supported behind this project. Thank you. Councillor Pentland.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to welcome the changes to the capital programme in relation to the Local Authority Treescape Fund. As members will see, this is a significant amount of funding from an external grant, which will allow us to continue our very significant scheme of tree planting in conjunction with local communities, which forms part of the multifaceted approach we're taking to tackling climate change. So really welcome that.
Excellent, thank you. I'm looking around, I don't seem to have any more speakers. So Councillor Bunday, I'm taking you've moved the report. I'd call upon someone to second that, please. Thank you, Councillor Binley. So the recommendations are set out on page 298 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Please may I see a show of hands in favour. Thank you.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. So, on to agenda item 14, budget forecast 2023-24 at period 7. So I'd like to call upon Councillor Lynn Buckingham to address the meeting, and your 3 minutes, Councillor Buckingham. Thank you.
Thank you very much again. In the executive summary 2.1, there is a dedicated school grant forecasting pressure of 8.59 million. Over the last 3 reporting periods, so period 5, it was 4.99 million. In forecast 6, it was 6.4 million, and now it's gone up to 8.59 million. Why are these pressures happening in such a short space of time? Does that not worry you? My question, because it worries me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckingham. I'd now like to invite Councillor Hakewill to address the meeting. Councillor Hakewill, the same 3 minutes for you.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 306 in your agenda today. 2.3. In order to help safeguard the financial position of the Council, officers will continue to seek efficiencies in year to offset that forecast overspend. The Council has a contingency budget and reserves available to call on to help fund in-year pressures. However, it will look to achieve alternative mitigations in the first instance before these are applied. Could the portfolio holder describe for me and for those watching what sort of in-year efficiencies have been implemented so far this year and will be in the following months, so as not to use contingency budgets and reserves to bail out overspending?
Thank you, Councillor Hakewill. I'd like to invite Councillor Bunday, Executive Member for Finance and Transformation, to introduce the report, and I'm sure he will answer some of your questions. Thank you.
As far as, and I'll take them in reverse order, as far as Councillor Hakewill's comments goes about mitigations, I think you only have to look around this room at some of my colleagues and the amount of savings and underspends in the various areas to show that they are delivering savings in their areas that will help mitigate some of the other pressures, and a lot of the pressures are coming from our demand-led services, and that's just a fact of life, I'm afraid. But as I say, I have to commend my colleagues around this table for the fact that they are working on that. As far as the dedicated schools grant forecast, yes, we are very, very concerned about it. The dedicated schools grant is a ring-fence grant for delivering education, and if you read through the report, it talks about the various different blocks, and the block that's causing the problem at the moment is the high needs block, and the situation is that we are talking to the Schools Forum and we're talking to the DFE, as in a lot of other organisations, a lot of other councils, to look at how we can actually mitigate that situation. But as far as moving money around that block or around the DSG, that is down to the Schools Forum, I'm afraid. This report provides commentary on the Council's forecast for the revenue outturn position 23-24 based on the information available as at period 7, which is October. The forecast position for each of the funds is as follows. General Fund, an overspend of £6.198 million, which is a reduction from period 6 of £7.575 million, which for Councillor Hakewill's benefit, that does show me that there are some mitigations going on. The housing revenue account, an overspend of £185,000. Dedicated schools grant is forecasted an overspend of £8.598 million. monitoring report sets out the material financial issues identified since the budget was set in February and is based on current emerging data for the year, and the Council will continue to assess and refine the forecasts on a regular basis using the latest intelligence available. The forecasts presented in this report are based on the best available data and information of the operations of this Council and represents the views of the budget holders and assistant directors. In order to help safeguard the financial position of this Council, officers will continue to seek efficiencies in year to offset the forecast overspend. The Council has a contingency budget and reserves available to call on to help fund in-year pressures. However, as has been reiterated already, it will look to achieve alternative mitigations in the first instance before these are applied. The NJC pay award, which is applicable to the majority of Council staff, has been agreed and results in a pressure of £2.222 million, which will be funded through the contingency budget, which will reduce the balance on the contingency budget from £3.746 million to £1.524 million. The forecast overspend of £6.198 million for the General Fund is against a net budget of £339.034 million. This is a favourable movement of £1.377 million from the period 6, where pressure of 7.575 was reported. Against favourable movements in place enabling corporate costs, there has again been an adverse impact in children's and now a further pressure from adult social services. The Children's Trust is now forecasting a pressure of £23.509 million, with additional staffing pressures within children's services has resulted in a further pressure of 605 for the period. Third-party payments and independent care spend and again staffing pressures has seen an adverse movement in the adult services to £3.459 million. Lower utility costs and additional building controlled income has resulted in a £152,000 favourable movement in place. Forecasting savings relating to the employer superannuation payments and unfunded pensions have contributed to a favourable movement in enabling of £1.522 million. The Council has set aside £5.708 million in 23-24 as a pay contingency to allow for annual increments and potential pay changes of 4%. The additional pressure from the pay award of £2.222 million will be funded through the corporate contingency budget. This budget will be allocated to services in period 8 to meet the increased costs. The annual increments have been charged across the authority, and the cost of this has been absorbed through the existing budgets, and as such, the increment of £1.1 million has been reflected as a saving. It is also estimated that business rates income for 23-24 is £2.666 million above the original budget. The Council's overall outturn forecast for the housing revenue account as of period 7 is a forecast overspend of £185,000 against an approved budget of £38.752 million. The details of the movement against budget are set out in the report at section 6. The Council's overall outturn forecast for the DSG as at period 7 is a forecast overspend of £8.598 million against a net spend of £120.7 million. And as I've said, this is something where we're discussing with both the Schools Forum and the DSG. And with that, Chair, I'm happy to propose the recommendations at paragraph 3.
Thank you, Councillor Bundy. I would now like to invite member debate from the floor. I have Councillor Edwards first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just to answer Councillor Buckingham's point, and I know Councillor Bundy did do that, absolutely. So it is predominantly coming from the high needs block, and this is because of the huge increase in EHCPs, which are coming through and have gone through. It is worrying, but it is a national issue as well, so it's not localised to Northants. Every authority in England is under that same pressure as well. at the last schools forum, which we met, I think it was last week, sorry, the days roll into one, that we have agreed to write to government and the DfE to have a look at this, to look at the funding mechanism that is used for that. There is a plan in place. You'll know that we are allowed to overspend, providing that we put a plan in to say how we're going to pay it back, and that plan is being worked on currently with the DfE, and we're also looking at perhaps having an increase from the 0.5% to the schools forum, but that will take probably another year to go through with that. But there are plans in place, but you're absolutely right to highlight it.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Harrison, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's probably important that I say something about the adult social care budget, given that it has increased by over 3 million as an overspend in this last forecast. And it's obviously a demand-led service, as Councillor Bundy mentioned, and he mentioned a lot of the pressures that we're facing. I think it's really worth pointing out just how extensive those increased pressures are. So in our older adults, the over 65s cohort, we're seeing increased pressures of 25%, and in the younger adults, 15%, which are unprecedented rates of increased demand. However, that doesn't mean that as a department we're sitting back and just shrugging our shoulders and hoping for the best. Absolutely not. Right now, very rapid and extensive work is being done, not only to ensure that our forecasting for the rest of the year is absolutely accurate and understood, but of course for our next financial year we know what those pressures may look like, and that we are able to find mitigations where we can. I mean, just for one example of a mitigation is to look at some of our highest cost care packages and see if they are actually what is required, and have they been reviewed recently? Are we getting the best value out of some of our contracts? We have already implemented cost savings, and some of those have been successful and some less so. So it's absolutely right that we get this rapid work done, and make sure that we do everything we can to keep our budgets under control. The first 2 years of this council being in existence, we did very well and came in on budget for adult social care. But we did, I should point out, get extra money from the government during winter that we haven't got this year. So some of those pressures were already understood that were going to come through. But the level and the scale of it is pretty unprecedented, and there's a lot of work that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. I don't see any more hands raised. So I have a mover from Councillor Bundy. I'm looking for a seconder for the paper. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. The recommendations are set out on page 306 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Please may I see a show of hands in favour?
For the final time this year, unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. So next item, urgent decision taken by the Leader of the Council. So on the 29th of November 2023, Councillor Jason Smithers, as Leader of the Council, took an urgent decision to approve an increase to the capital budget for the A509 Isham bypass of £0.79 million. Full Council, at its meeting on the 7th of December 2023, subsequently approved the varment of £0.79 million of capital budget from the 2023-24 Integrated Transport Block allocation and 2024-25 Integrated Transport Block allocation to the A509 Isham bypass. Details of the decision can be found on the Council's website via the link detailed on page 2 of the agenda pack. Any urgent items of business? So I can confirm that I have received no requests to consider any urgent items of business at this meeting. So members, that concludes the business of the agenda. I thank those members, officers and the public who have attended, including those that have watched online via our YouTube channel. And I would like to, on behalf of the Leader and myself and the Executive, would like to wish all of you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we will see you all in 2024. And now declare the meeting closed.